Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
We are about 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Scarlet Fu and Vonnie Quinn here, counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help us take you beyond the bell with the global simulcast, Massar and Tim Stenovec, back from Los Angeles. And of course, welcome to our Bloomberg Television, radio, and YouTube audiences worldwide as we look through the day, the trading day. It's a good day if you're long on risk. And Carol and Tim, Monday is apparently a very good day for U.S. stocks, and this Monday is no exception.
Yeah, kind of interesting, right, considering everything that's going on in the world. And an interesting day where there's a fair amount of volatility when it comes to Bitcoin. Like, okay, we have an ETF. We don't have an ETF. Like, it's interesting to see kind of the news flow and depending on the asset class, because I'm looking at Bitcoin. Went up as much as 30,000. We're now at 28, went as low as 27. So talk about some really extreme swings. Tim and I were just talking about it. It's just kind of a wacky day overall.
Yeah, that move, the biggest move since March. I have to say, I'm a little puzzled by the moves in the equity market that we're seeing today, given that we have so much Fed speak to hear this week, and we have to hear from so many companies in the S&P 500 that are set to report earnings. We're going to hear from Jay Powell later this week. I will say we did speak to Cole Smead, the president and CEO over at Smead Capital Management, a little earlier today. He was pretty bearish on the indices. I mean, he's a stock picker, so take it with a grain of salt. But he does think that because the S&P 500 has been powered this year by just a handful of companies, those magnificent seven as they've been dubbed, he thinks it's going to fall sharply from here, double digits.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, the bifurcation of opinions here. We'll definitely know in a few weeks what happens in the quarter, but you do have to wonder if today's risk on isn't just sort of a flight to the quality of U.S. assets in general with so much uncertainty in the world.
And a reflection, perhaps, of the fact that the worst has not yet happened. A ground war has not begun in Gaza, although plenty of people say that that is still kind of the assumption that something will happen. There you have the closing bells. You have gains of at least 1% for the S&P and the NASDAQ. The S&P 500 gaining 1.1%, 45 points. I believe this marks the 15th straight Monday that the S&P 500 has closed higher. The NASDAQ Composite Index gaining about 1.2%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average is the laggard, sort of, gaining only 0.9%.
Yeah, and digging a little bit deeper into the S&P 500, Scarlett, I mean, you've got most names in the S&P 500 higher today, 459 to be exact, 43 to the downside, and just one unchanged.
Okay, I don't know how often this happens because I don't really recall seeing this too often, but if you slice up the S&P 500 into 24 industry groups, guess what? Everything is green.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Retail, transportation, media, entertainment, they lead the way up at least 1.5%. Retail up by more than 2%. Tech, hardware, banks, and energy are the laggards, but they're still in the green, as you can see.
All right, so let's get to some of the green. I had so much to choose from, apparently, then. Pfizer was atop my list, though. It was up about 3.6%. Wacky day, right? We got some news after the close on Friday that took the stock down. This is after the company slashed per share adjusted earnings expectations to $1.45 a share to $1.65 a share. That was, again, Friday night. And this had to do, they also made an agreement with the government. They're going to take back 8 million doses of Paxlovid this year. That maybe has some upside to it because it means then they can actually sell it and make more money off of the product versus keeping it in the U.S. government stockpile. So nonetheless, Pfizer definitely an outperformer in today's session. Charles Schwab saw that atop the S&P 500 throughout the day. The firm reported bank deposits for the third quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Adjusted earnings per share beat estimates. Analysts were pretty positive on the company's September trends. The company, $46 billion garnered, or gathered, I should say, in core net new assets, including $27 billion in September. So just the amount of money coming into Schwab, and you saw that stock up about 4.7%. Lululemon, number one in the NASDAQ 100, got some news late Friday also that it's going to be put into the S&P 500, replacing Activision Blizzard. So you've got that stock up 10%. And I just want to mention Dexcom, because this was trading high among the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, up about 3.6%. It makes glucose monitoring systems for those with diabetes. Coverage initiated with Outperform and $110 share price target over at Leerink Partners. So that stock closing at just below $80 a share.
All right, you got the gainers. It was actually not that difficult for me to find decliners, though. Apple barely holding on to its declines today, falling just 0.07%. I'm going to go ahead and round that up to down 0.1%. It was down earlier as much as 1.1%. This after Bloomberg reported two separate analyses, Scarlett, that showed the iPhone 15 is just not selling as well as the iPhone 14 did over the same period of time in China. Down 4.5% compared with the iPhone 14 over the first 17 days after release. That's according to the market tracker Counterpoint Research. We should note Apple has not come out and said anything about these sales thus far. Separately, Jefferies analysts said that the sales of the iPhone 15 were down by an even sharper double-digit percentage versus the iPhone 14. Still, Apple barely closing in the red today, down just about 0.1%. Let's look at shares of Moderna. Carol talked about Pfizer and the challenges that Pfizer talked about on Friday. Well, shares of Moderna were the ones taking the hit as a result today. The company touched a 3-year low even after the company reaffirmed its COVID-19 vaccine revenue forecast for the full year. Shares of Moderna fell late Friday after Pfizer slashed its profit outlook amid waning demand for COVID treatments. We should note that Moderna still anticipates it will have improved visibility about the expected U.S. market size after seeing full vaccination trends through October of 2023 when people go out and get vaccinated throughout this month. And if the U.S. market for COVID-19 vaccines is approximately 50 million administered doses, then Moderna still does expect to be in the bottom half of the disclosed range. And then Vista Outdoors shares, ticker VSTO, not for long, finishing it down by 24% today. Largest single-day drop since 2020. This after the company came out and cut its sales guidance for the full year. Now, separately, the company also said it's selling its ammunition business to a Czech arms conglomerate. It's a $1.9 billion deal. Instead, the company's going to, from now on, focus on sports and outdoor equipment. That deal is expected to close in May of next year. As a result, Vista Outdoors is going to change its name to Revelist. It'll also trade under the ticker Revelist, yeah.
What does that even mean?
I think it means get outside and buy some gear. The ticker is going to be GEAR. And it's going to have the brands Fox, Bell, Giro, Camelback. These are all, some good cycling brands that I like. I'm a cyclist. Yeah. Bushnell, the binoculars, Sims Fishing, Foresight Sports, Bushnell Golf, and more. So they're going to focus on outdoors and then golf and camping as well.
I'm always puzzled by company names and how sometimes they're just completely made up.
I bet a consultant was paid a lot to come up with that name, Scarlett.
I'm guessing as well.
Maybe
All right.
a group of them.
Let's go through focus groups, and they're all like, "Oh, great name, great name."
Yes,
not so much.
Let's go through treasuries really quickly. There's only one name for them: U.S. government debt. U.S. treasuries, you could see there, yields moving up, price down, yields higher, and the 2-year currently above 5%, 5.09%. The 10-year moving up to 4.708%. We've seen some big moves of late. This is also yet another big move. Certainly more movement on the long end of the yield curve than on the shorter end, continuing that trend that we've seen over the last couple of days.
Yeah, much more movement on the long end, which is really interesting. And at one point, will this make the curve disinvert? Stephen Major was on this morning on Bloomberg saying that, yeah, that'll happen, but whether it's because of the short end or the long end, it remains to be seen.
I'm done debating Fed policy and interest rates because they're just going to happen. What I'm really into is what's going on in terms of earnings this week, because you've got Goldman Sachs, Bank of America tomorrow. We've got American Airlines. You've got, I'm looking at my list, Netflix, Tesla,
Netflix.
Right, American Express. I feel like what we get in terms of commentary, what we get in terms of outlook will maybe help us in terms of figuring out what the rest of the picture is in terms of the economy, corporate profits, and maybe ultimately what the Fed has to do.
I think, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you think investors will be more discerning this time around when it comes to companies talking up their AI prospects as opposed to what they're actually doing? Because in the last couple of quarters, that was enough to get everyone excited. But at this point, it's a little bit more like you have to show me something now.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good point. I think we want to see what kind of visibility you have. And is, visibility, Vonnie, is it good, upbeat, thinking about the rest of the year and really going into the next year?
Well, and as we've seen, it may not be AI, but certainly the conference calls have been extremely, important in investor reaction. And what will the conference calls, what will their sort of common theme be this time? And will it have something to do with the Middle East? That's one of the things that could definitely terrify investors. So you sort of wonder, will executives go there?
In terms of what we have coming tomorrow, I'm perhaps most interested in Bank of America. Bank of America has such a good read on the U.S. consumer, really good understanding of what consumers are spending their money on, and the consumer powers this economy. So I'm going to be listening to what Moynihan has to say about the strength of the U.S. consumer.
And
good tease.
Stay tuned because we'll hear it on Bloomberg.
Brian Moynihan says, thank you, Tim. We've also got retail sales coming up tomorrow, so don't forget, we'll check them out in the morning. All right, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and of course, Bloomberg Originals. We will all see you again tomorrow.